basically reviewing the operating system and platform modules for upgrade patching. A lot of folks don't tend to like to patch because that creates a lot of work, a lot of headache, and a lot of testing. However, to keep your stuff up to date, you definitely need to patch it. And so, although you do have to do a lot of prep work to do the patching and the testing and to make sure everything is fine after you've done this, you still need to enforce the patching cycles to keep up with security. A lot of folks tend to neglect that and push it as far as possible, or just pick certain feature patches that they need to make something work and ignore all the rest of them for as long as possible.
Do you ever do internal or external security audits? Do you ever put on that hat and really get in deep on what your overall security as an organization looks like?
So this is near and dear to me, is how do you protect the network so that you don't have threats come in and attack the systems and the servers and the software that live on that network. And there's a lot of different things that you can do now beyond firewalls, beyond the actual security elements, to safeguard and to keep the traffic that doesn't need to be in a certain area out of that area. And that can help you if you do run into an attack. It prevents the distribution of malware beyond certain borders. So separating the LAN from the core of your video and voice infrastructure in the core is important. There's also insider attacks that you can protect against using creative network technologies for monitoring as well as locking things down.
Backup and restore policies, are they written? Are they understandable to your staff on the specifically the backup and restore side? Then also add in disaster recovery plans as well. What elements of your network will recover automatically from some kind of disaster, and which elements will need manual intervention in order to recover? I mean, we're talking very, very large events here. Do you have a plan for some of those very, very large events? And then also an idea of a continuity of operations action plan as well. That also includes people as well. Do you have plans for what will happen if certain members of your team are not available to do the work? And right along with that is, do you ever test these policies? Nobody really cares how tidy your backup is. What you really care about is how quickly and completely you can get up and running again. And without testing these things, you really have no idea if it's going to work.
We need to make sure as organizations that we have somebody on our team that understands all aspects of your network and how those systems integrate. It's not that you have to have one person that understands everything and sort of does everything, but that you have people that understand their piece and how it interfaces with the other pieces, and that together you have a full understanding of the network.
Passwords. So, and passwords, I want to use it as a general term, not just something that you use with your user account to type into a web interface. But passwords are everywhere. And they may be secrets that could be a passcode, so they may actually be numeric. But just the awareness of the fact that there's all sorts of these passwords out there in your systems. Some of them you may use as a user, some you may only use as an admin, and yet there's some that not even admins are aware of, and we run into that on a regular basis. And so being able to handle those passwords responsibly really can help mitigate the threat of an attack, especially when there's passwords you don't know about get leaked out through a denial of service or brute force attack, or just a good intentioned system management policy. It's important that you make sure the policies and the strategies that you have in the company get carried out throughout. There's different strategies in terms of maintaining the secrecy of the passwords, and also things that you can do to make sure that if a password were to get out, there's ways to minimize the impact it may have on your business, especially your user services. So definitely ask the question, are the password policies really being followed everywhere? And do we think through it and periodically evaluate those?
So I want to ask the question, do you ever do scanning of your own network? Do you ever scan the internet accessible interfaces that you have in your network? The idea here being to make sure that you don't have any holes in your firewall policies that you wouldn't know about otherwise. It's okay and good to review your firewall policies, but doing the actual scanning can often be really, really helpful to uncover things that you can miss otherwise. How often do you fire up Netcat and scan your own network?
How do you actually obsolete or end of life obsolete devices, right? So you're trying to enforce new security policies, but your old devices don't support these new policies. Therefore you can't enforce your new security policy. So without coming up with all sorts of hacks that leaves you open to the same security holes that you're trying to negate in the first place. So they have to have some sort of plan in place of deprecating obsolete devices that no longer support the protocols.
One of the things that passwords can get leaked out in is, well, how are you backing up your data? Is one system policy making you vulnerable in another way? So when you do backups, what are you backing up? And if you're backing up sensitive information, how do you protect the sensitive information without overly complicating the disaster recovery or the restoration processes? Periodically evaluating and having a well comprehensive thought through backup plan is critical to business these days. Knowing where and how often the data is backed up, have it validated in terms of, is it still good data? Because there's no sense in keeping a database from years ago. And we do see customers that, because they haven't thought through it, they end up keeping backup copies of backup copies of backup copies of data that's never going to do them any good. And so looking at that periodically and having that reviewed by a third party can be very helpful, because you get out of the idea of, oh, well, we just need to gather data and store it. But it's really not protecting you, because when the disaster happens, and they do, the contingency plan's no good if you don't know how to use the data that you have. And so you're unarchiving and unzipping this and unzipping that, and it creates more problems than you had to begin with. So take a good look at the backups and how you store sensitive data like audit logs that may record attacks, so that data is backed up and not itself susceptible to attack. And going back to the passwords and configuration, provisioning data. And then there's some data that's near real time that you need to have backed up, and that's separate. So keep all those things in mind.
Is security part of your change management process? Is this part of how you go about making changes in your network routinely, but then also is it part of your process if something's broken and you have an outage and you need to fix it? So after an outage or after a change is made to resolve an issue, are you going back and are you looking at that change that was made to see not only functionality-wise, but also security-wise? Did it leave you open to exploits that you previously had covered?
The exposure of individual server components to the internet. So there's lots of different security border elements out there now. It's not just firewalls, and firewall means a lot of different things now. So really considering where you put your firewalls in place. Are they handling real-time data? Are they handling non-real-time data? Are they providing you a load balancing facility? And are your servers themselves unnecessarily opened up to attacks on software that you don't even know is on the server? So thinking through those things and having those things periodically evaluated really does protect you.
Are you using some sort of security framework, cybersecurity framework specifically? I personally prefer the NIST cybersecurity framework, but it's not enough to just sort of have declared that you have a cybersecurity framework. You also have to make sure that you're training your people on the cybersecurity framework from the very top all the way to the standard office worker. It's important that your people have training so that they can be attentive to the things that you need them to be attentive to. And so I think training is fundamental. The training is only valuable if there's a real test at the end. You've got to sort of make sure that once you've sort of decided on a cybersecurity framework and you've done your training on your cybersecurity framework, that you're testing to make sure that the people that need to know and understand that framework do know and understand that framework.